Hi, folks. Off-grid. What does it mean to be off-grid or off the grid or off-grid living lifestyle? But before that, let me firstly welcome you on this grayish day. Gray day. Oh, it's gray. Was sunny a bit. Today is the last day of December. And welcome to my off-grid homestead. Now, like I said today, I want to talk about, over my shoulder you can see maybe I would call it a bushcraft style 100 square foot clubhouse, shelter, whatever, and it's off the grid. And our gathering place, I have a video on that one. I have a video on our gathering place. That's completely off the grid. So again, what does it mean to be off the grid? So I guess there are about 5 or so definitions. And I'll get to my definition in a minute. But let's start from what most people think of when they think of off-grid living or lifestyle or whatever, is basically what they've seen on TV, documentaries, or maybe here on YouTube. And that is, I just saw something really interesting down there. I hope I can remember to show you. There's 4 trees growing within 3 inches of, this is about 3 inches. They're about 3 inches apart from each other. 4 completely different species. Anyway, we'll come to that in a minute, or at the end if I remember. So, off the grid. The traditional, I suppose you can say, historical whatever, is when the pioneers came here, or wherever they went. And that's when they had nothing. They had maybe an oil lamp, or in some other countries they had to burn peat or cow poop, whatever, for their lighting, or maybe even for the source of cooking, heating, whatever. And they definitely didn't have all the amenities and the luxuries that we have today. That was maybe 150, 200 years ago. And today, there are still places on Earth where, for one reason or another, people don't have access. Either they don't have the resources, or they're way too far away, or communities that have maybe possibly never been influenced by the outside. And so they don't have any renewables, and maybe for their heating and cooking, whatever they use, maybe firewood or other sources, natural, renewable, possibly sources. They grow what they can and eat themselves. Obviously, they don't have access to, depending on where they live. What I mean is, if they don't live somewhere tropical, well, obviously they don't have access to things like pineapples and citrus fruit and bananas and that. So they grow what they can, and they may or may not even know about other things. And then there are communities like north of Canada, Inuit, formerly Eskimos, where they're above the tree lines. There are no trees there. There's just pretty much snow and ice. And so they have to get things flown to them, and it costs a lot. And maybe they can or they can't afford to buy that sort of a luxury. Maybe even tomatoes, lettuce, pretty much everything's a luxury there. And having a greenhouse is also expensive, and to maintain, to upkeep, to someone actually going in there, or people and working it, because you don't just put it in there, it knows what to do. The seed, you have to tend to it. So they're still around. Those people are still around, and those are the traditional hardcore, I guess you can say, more of an off-grid, because unlike the folks in the Iqaluit, Nunavut, northern Canada, these other people that might be in deep down in the forest, in the jungle, I might even say, they don't have any satellite access to internet, cell signals. They don't have any of that. So that really is truly off the grid. And then there are places where maybe that's not, there are places that are a little bit more not ahead or advanced, but they're a little bit less off grid. So say you go to Moby Desert of I'm guessing, never been Mongolia, and you'll see someone with a little putt motorcycle. They have maybe one little tiny solar panel outside of the yurt. Maybe they'll have a cell signal that they may or may not be able to use where they are, but they have it so when we go to town or something they can use. So that's sort of the next least off grid. Thirdly, you come to places where people have, I guess, have made a conscious decision to be off the grid. And those are still people not like the city folks, like maybe you're thinking, or definitely not me. These are people that 150, 200, 300 years ago were called Amish, and they still call Amish, like the Pennsylvania Dutch, German, whatever. And we have Amish here. There's an Amish family here that we buy our beeswax and honey from. They're about an hour away from us, drive from us. But they used to be 30 years ago or so completely off the grid. So they horse and buggies. They still have horse and buggies, but they didn't have any cell phones, and I still don't think they have cell phones. But they didn't even have landlines. They didn't work on certain days of the week and month, and they had their community potlucks, the barn raising, and then obviously didn't have any internet then. Nope. Today, I only recently got high-speed internet myself. They what else? They cooked. Oh, they cooked. They used. They ate what they could grow. They made their own soaps and whatever, and as some of you already probably do. Now, my understanding is that recently, in the past, I would even say 20 years or so, some Amish are connecting with regular businesses to sell their goods. For instance, there's a video I have on our wood-fired cook stove, which is Amish built. And so what they do is that they make it on off times, like in the winter time, or anyway, anytime before there's planting and growing and soil prep and all that stuff, when they're not on the field, basically. And they sell their goods to stores, and then the stores have a markup, obviously, on them, and then they sell it to general public. You still, I don't think you can get a hold of them other than going to their farms, and I'm not sure how open they are to receiving you. Like, for instance, where I go, they know us. We pretty much both came from another province at the same time, pretty much. And then, but they've now recently, that past year, they built a little, I shouldn't say little, it's the size of bigger than a small house for their sort of a roadside storefront kind of thing, so people wouldn't have to drive from the road a few kilometers to reach their house. They bring their goods and they sell it there. And so now some of their young folks go and maybe have computer training. They work for other places. This is just to supplement their income. Land prices being, I don't want to say high, land prices are, and I'll do a video on who's buying land right now, which is pretty much everyone. And so land prices are going up, and these folks historically didn't have a lot of money. And of course, they didn't have a whole lot of expenses either, but I mean, their earnings were a lot more modest than an average person would be. So now some of the young are going out and working in the regular stores, maybe behind the scenes, so they're not necessarily seeing other people or anyway. Then you have people like who are, so now that was third. So number 4, you have people that are like not like, but they are actually Mennonites. Mennonites are more or less dressed like Amish, but they're not Amish at all. They're not at all Amish. They have cell phones, they have cars, they're very business-minded, the ones that I know around here. So for instance, if I have one Amish family that I know of that we shop from, there's probably 10 or 9 or 10 or more that I may not know about, Mennonites. And they try to live below their means too. So they don't have necessarily new cars or flashy cars, or obviously not outfits, because more or less dress very simply. And so they do have probably internet. If they have cell phones, they have internet, they have cars, that kind of thing. But still, they're very much low key. Whether they're on social media or not, because they're business minded, I'm guessing they are on social media to sell their goods. I'm not 100% sure, but if you know, let me know. Maybe it's different where you live. And then there are people like, I think I've got them all done right. And then there's people like me. When we came here and decided to be off the grid, we built not actually, I think I skipped one step. There are people that I have neighbors in the neighborhood who are off the grid and not 100%, for instance. We're not 100% either. We have to run a generator, even though we have 5 powerful batteries. New batteries, we still, for the months of November and December, we have to run our generator from time to time, depending on how many consecutive days of no sun we get, to top them up. But so there are people here in this neighborhood who they for whatever reason they didn't want to spend the money, or they didn't have the means, or they wanted that romantic idea of being off the grid. So they have cell phones, they have cars, albeit old. They are on social media, but and they also have a solar assembly, albeit a very small one, but they don't have necessarily drilled well, or they don't have a flushing toilet, so they have to bucket their waste somewhere away, and basically their solar power is so small that they can't run a fridge or freezer, and it's basically more or less is for their modem and some lights being LED. They don't use a lot of light. And so then now it's, I think number 6, I guess, is me. It's not glamping. It's we spent a lot of money building this one main building structure. So we didn't come here with intention to suffer, as some people, I guess 2 people here are thinking that they're here like more like Buddhists, like they feel like they're here to suffer on earth in this lifetime to suffer. We didn't come here with that intention. We spent 20,000. This is 9 years ago's money, not today. So double everything that I tell you in price. 20,000 in insulation. 20,000 then on solar assembly, and probably still be the same today, because some elements like solar panels are cheaper, not a lot, because now they're more powerful, but the batteries are more expensive. Copper wires, no change, they're the same price. All the other modules of solar assembly, which I have a video for you can go see, but then lithium ion batteries are a lot more. So whereas a lead acid battery would have been $600 a piece for a smaller one, then by comparison, a lithium ion battery for one is about 5,000. So if you have 4 of them, that's 20,000 right there. That's basically the price of the extra you pay to have an EV car as opposed to a gasoline powered car. So that's the cost. Anyway, we built it well, and we drilled a well. At the time it was 4,000. This year, we're still in this year. A neighbor drilled a well for hers, but she wanted for one of her cabins that she rents out, and I think she said 8,000, 12,000. I don't have the exact number, but a lot more than what we paid, the 4,000. Put a septic system in, 10,000 then, 20,000 probably now today. So how are we off the grid? We're off the grid because we decided not to be dependent on the utility companies for power, for heating source, for that kind of thing. So you won't see any cables running from the road to our house, as you would see some other neighbors, because of our solar assembly. We did that because we didn't want to have to read at night by the candlelight, or long winter nights, go to bed at 6 at night because you don't have power, you don't have internet. You'll be squinting to read a book, or how much can you read? Can't really make any crafts or whatever. There isn't, basically life is over after 6 o'clock, more or less, because days, sun sets at 4:30. What are you going to do? Only so much you can do. We have septic because we didn't want to have to bucket our poop somewhere far. Right now, today is a gloriously mild day. It's about maybe 1 or 2 degrees plus Celsius at the very last day of December, where it should have been minus 20 to minus 25 Celsius at this time of year here. I suppose that's one of the things you have to decide for yourselves. I can't decide for you what's important to you. For instance, 3 hours south of us on the coast, Atlantic coast, it's historically, it's always been like this. Very little snow, but mild, but also very, very, very gray and dreary and dark. But no snow, or very little snow, and milder, like we have it here. But what we had instead, because of our higher elevations and on the mountain and all that, like I said, minus 20, minus 25. There were years we even got close to minus 40 Celsius with wind chill. But super blue skies, super bright sunny days, but also no ticks. So you have to decide. You want to go somewhere warm, like I just said, 3 hours south of us, or somewhere else on the planet where it's warmer climate, and it's getting warmer. What you would have there would be ticks, but longer growing season. You would have, you can maybe go to the ocean, but then hurricane seasons, which are getting longer and more intense every year. It is here, so I don't, just 3 hours south of us. So I'm assuming over there too. My aunt lives in England, and they just had probably the worst, most severe storms just 3 weeks ago. I know it's an island, but there are many islands. But for them to have that historical severity of storms, and that's the other thing. When storms happen, and it happens south of us more than here, there are power blackouts. When they're blackouts, I mean, a lot of people can lose their minds not having internet, or not to judge. Maybe me too. I'm becoming dependent on it now that I have this high-speed internet. But when you're not dependent on, when you don't care if a tree falls on a line, or the disruptions in power, because you're not dependent on the solar, you're not dependent on the utilities. You have your own solar, so cars can go by pitch black neighborhoods, and you see one house with lights on. How is that possible? So we paid the price for the septic because we didn't want to, like I was saying, we don't. Oh, and there's lots of snow. You're not dumping your poop right outside your door. This is in 1600s London, where you open your window and dump your poop on the sidewalk. You have to walk it somewhere. And in high, foot or two of minimum of foot, if not 2 feet of snow and ice and wind and whatever, you have to go and dump it and come back. And how often you have to do it depends on how big your family is. And poop itself doesn't smell as much, especially when you layer it with sawdust, but it's the pee, the urine, that stinks. And in the summertime, really no better, because in the summertime, although it will be like now, it's not cumbersome to walk to a distance somewhere to dump your waste. You can't keep that bucket in your house for long, because here our summers are like a regular summer. We had a summer or two that in the 11 years that we've been here, that we reached almost 40 degrees Celsius. And when it's not humid here, thank God, like some other parts of Canada or other parts of the globe, which would have been really bearable for me. I can't handle the humidity like that. But still, you can't keep a bucket of waste in your house. You have to still go take it out often. And wherever you dump it, because it's hot, it's still going to stink. You got to keep covering it up. It's work. You have to decide for yourselves what is your level of comfort, but really discomfort. how tough are you? When they say tough as nails, in my opinion, they're probably talking about barn nails, those thick, long nails. You have to be super tough to be able to go hardcore off grid. We have a car, it's a gasoline powered car. If I could afford, I would probably have an EV car, but I would still have a car. Why? Because I don't want to have to walk 60 kilometers to town to drag my wagon behind me, and you don't have a horse or a donkey or an oxen, which some people used to do as pioneers. You've seen the Western movies, right? To drag, or the Amish. Amish don't live necessarily that far either, and 60 kilometers. I don't think so. The Amish that I know, they're not 60 kilometers away from town, but we are. So because you want to drive in comfort, and that's the other thing. When I say how far, the farther you go from a town, uh, the less the cheaper the properties get, cheaper the land gets, the cheaper the existing homes get, because not a lot of people want to be that isolated. If you can be, and I urge you to really consider, sit down with your spouse or your family, find out if you can be that isolated. We are somewhat isolated, but we have something I mentioned in one of my other videos. We have 72 neighbors now, whereas when we first came here, we were 27. That's a 27 neighbors, and it felt like we were living in a desert or forest, if you will. Nobody here. And during the holidays, people would go away. People that could afford it, they would go away, and like maybe 4 people left in the neighborhood. The size of something like 500 or 1,000 acres, whatever that is in hectares. So if you go somewhere really in isolation, it's just you and your family at that time, at any time of year, at no neighbors to go to for help, or whatever reason, whatever reason you have to go to. You might fall off a ladder. Yes, just cheaper to live there, but can you make it? I'm not trying to dissuade you. This decision is yours. You think about it. You decide what you want to do. We have a cell phone, but for me, I use it for podcasts or as an emergency, and I wish I didn't have to, because it costs too much for what we earn to have cell phones that we don't use all that much, just as an emergency, just as insurance, or just for podcast. Now I have a camera. I don't necessarily even need. Before I used to use my cell phone as a camera too. They're old. They're old cell phones. They're barely updatable, but still, the monthly fee that you pay, that they're paid for, the monthly we bought them used, so the monthly fee that you pay, it's not nothing. And we have internet now. It is a luxury because of, I guess, Elon. But it's not cheap in some areas. Our area is $162 a month. You have internet in the city where you live, maybe it costs you $100 a month for unlimited and fast. So you have to decide for yourself what it is you want, how tough you are, where you want to live. And then once you have all that, even then, contact someone in that area that you've decided to move to a local guide, to tell you about the challenges of living there. For instance, I'm that local guy in central New Brunswick, as a coach, as a guide, to provide guidance and say, where you are, that's not necessarily a good spot you want to be, because you're surrounded by farmers and they may be spraying, or you're surrounded, there's some wooded area, but that's owned by a corporation that's going to probably be clear cut it, and they clear cut it, they spray it so that nothing else grows but that one type of tree that they want, call it monoculture, and it indiscriminately kills everything else, not just different species of trees. So there's so much to this, so much to know. That's just for here. I mean, some other parts of the province, maybe not our province, because our province has enough water, but Nova Scotia and Ontario, some provinces that were warmer historically, just as we're getting warmer here, now, whereas they were already warm, now they're getting hotter. So think California and places that were historically somewhat dry, now they're getting drier and drier and drier. And so if it's not raining as much, it's not snowing at all, so where is the aquifer underground? How is it getting replenished? You got to drill deeper and deeper. Drilling costs a lot. You can no longer dig by hand like 2, 3, 4, 500 years ago, and you see water ground level, that which you still have to filter, and because it's not down in the aquifer, it's muddy, murky. Yes, you still have to boil it and all that stuff, and it takes a long time to do. But at that time, there was enough rain. There wasn't so populated that you couldn't find water. But some places, people buying land, I hear, and they're moving, and the well is dry, and then they drill it, and they go farther and farther and farther down, and it costs thousands, tens of thousands, maybe even. Depends on how dry the place is. You're going to California, you're going to Nova Scotia, or you're coming to New Brunswick, where we have a high water table. But because we're on bedrock, it's not. It's not necessarily marshland. Whereas if you go 3 hours south of us, they're pretty much on sea level, and they're floodplains. Floodplains. Sure, floodplains. So they get flooded regularly. It's been that way since we came here 10 years now. It's getting worse. So really decide, sit down. It's a big move. For some of you, making this big endeavor might be a one kick at the can chance. And if you miss it, will you be able to sell that and move somewhere else? Buying is so much easier than selling. But, let me know. I will, if you see places around here that you want to buy, I can help you. Or if it's in New Brunswick, or maybe even some other province, I can tell you what generally to look for. You can maybe send me the address, and I can look at the aerial view and see what's around there. I can't tell about your neighbors. You won't even know even if you go to see a house, you won't know if your neighbor is a good neighbor, or is a noisy neighbor, or violent neighbor. You don't know. You just don't know. You're just taking a chance. But if you can, and I think you should, is what I mean to say, don't necessarily buy a property based on price. I'll give you an example. Our particular neighborhood. So we're on so imagine two sides of a square, right? We're at the corner. This property is at a corner. So if you go down that line 2 kilometers or less, between 1 and 2 kilometers south, that's where the road ends. It doesn't necessarily end. It narrows and narrows and narrows, such that then you can only an ATV, all-terrain vehicles, if you don't know, or side-by-sides, when 2 people can sit side by side. But there's still those recreational vehicles that can go through. And that's that. And then on this side, on the west side, the road on the west side is basically the same number of kilometers. And if you go straight up, we're at a T. Actually, this would have been a better example. And then just the same kilometers, about 1 to 2 kilometers, the road ends there too. This side doesn't end. This side gets attached to, just like my arm is, another road, a major artery. Major artery, I mean for rural. Anyway, I have neighbors that are bought at the end of this road. There are 3 people that live at the end of this road going south, and then there are many people that live at the end of or close to the end of that road. These people, I see them from my window. I see them 9, 10 times a day driving back and forth and back and forth and back and forth just to get to the core where we are. Why? Because they went by price. They decided it was cheap there. Land is land, rural is rural, is a community. But what you're forgetting is that little bit, it's just an annoyance at first. But every time you got to clean that car in the winter, summertime, air conditioning. Whereas there are people that have bought at this very corner that I am. How many are we? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or 7. they just walk. It's almost like this intersection is downtown, almost downtown again for rural. People can just walk or bike, and our forest school is just across the road. When my daughter was going to it, she had a 5 minute if it was cold, or 7 minutes if it was a warmer day, walk to school. Do you know what I'm saying? Now, there are people that have bought at almost halfway down the road that goes into that, I say, the main road. They bought over there only to find out that the neighbor is so loud 2-3 times a year. He has like maybe some kind of a gathering, some kind of a festival, and people put their music on, which I don't think is, we don't hear it because we're so far away, but they hear it because they're right up against it. And they have little kids and thinking, why are you playing music at night or whatever? So you see what I'm saying? Even when you come to the rural, it really shouldn't be like this. And I'm going to make a video on my ideal community, what I want to do if I'm able to, either here or elsewhere, and how I'm going to be screening people. It's going to be inclusive to people that are like-minded, and not everyday people that you would find anywhere downtown. Not going to be like that. So I hope this video was helpful to you, and I hope that you take my words to heart, because if you don't, either it means that you want to experience hardship on your own, and there's nothing wrong with that. There are many people that want to, they're not for hearing advice from others, which doesn't make sense for me. If you're watching this, you probably do want to know. Personally, I want to know as much as I can know, so I can make a really informed decision. And because I don't have the means to come up with a whole scenario, build things, and then say, what? I can't make it here. Do you know what I mean? So if you're looking for property, we have property for sale, we have land for sale. I can help you with the vicinity near here, what things should be like if you don't want to be here. But if you decide, if you've ever been to our neighborhood, and if you've want to come to visit, and if you've decided, and that's the other thing, I know people that have come to this neighborhood and say, oh, I love this neighborhood, I want to, this is my forever place. And then they go and buy a house half an hour away because they think it's close enough. And then they regret it. They try to sell it, and they're having a hard time selling it because, like I said, buying is easier than selling. If you've decided to be in a particular neighborhood, and then it's the same as any other place on earth. Different neighborhoods are different prices. They could even be on the same road. So don't assume that it's all the same. So now these people commuting back and forth, sometimes twice a day. So if they're bringing their kids to the forest school, they bring them half hour one way, then they go home. That's half hour back. They come back to pick them up, half hour, go back home, a half hour. That's 2 hours a day. Who has that much time? I mean, I'm not employed, but how many people have that much time to put 2 hours a day aside? I mean, I know if you're in the city with the traffic and that, maybe you're used to it, but it wears on you. And then the wear and tear on the road. Oh yeah, speaking of when I was saying off the grid, just going back to that for a second, we now have a 3-year-old car. It's new to us. It's new to us, but it's a 3-year-old car is still fairly new. And I urge you to don't go to anywhere rural. I'm guessing if there's anything like here with a 4-door sedan, like a regular car, or worse, like a little like a sort of a Prius or a hybrid. That's not made for this neighborhood. That's not made for rural. That's not made for the country. The back roads are not the same. They're potholes. Whereas you may have potholes that I had potholes when we lived in the city. You don't hit the potholes at 80 kilometers an hour. You hit it maybe at 60 or 50 kilometers an hour. You might even have time to slow down. Maybe there's enough traffic that you can never do 60 kilometers an hour on that road. But here, you're doing 80. There's a pothole. You hit it and you can destroy your car. Buy a car fit for where you live. Maybe you need a truck. I don't know. But there's so much to consider. Don't just bet the farm and just pick up and leave just because you're sick and tired of your life as it's going, as the status quo. There's a lot to consider. There people go to school to be trained for something that they can benefit from. This is no different. There are people like me that will teach you how to do whatever, wherever you're going, so that you don't have to suffer, unless you want to suffer. Like I said, in that case, then I'm not sure why you're watching this video. Anyway, so that was my 6 that I can come up with definitions of what is considered off-grid. By the way, I want you to listen to something before I go. I don't know how long I've been. This footage has been going on, but in that time you haven't heard a single car go by, or a truck, or whatever. It's quiet. This is where I want to be. If this is where you want to be, just know that there are trade-offs as well. I love it. I love this peace and quiet, and it's not for everyone. Just maybe go visit. Anyway, I told you I wanted to show you something when I started. If this battery is still running, I'll show you. See that there? I might even try to zoom. There is a to the right of that bunch, there's a spruce sapling growing. To the left, if some of you might know the difference between spruce and fir. You see how they're different? The one on the right has actual branches that have lots of needles, more like rounded, but the one on the left, I don't know why this keeps turning. The one on the left is flat leaves. That's 2 trees. Now you see actual bark that you might recognize. That's a baby birch. That brown bark is kind of thicker. You see it on the right? And then to the left of it, there's this scrawny, could also be a birch. Yeah, I think it is a birch that's growing. So 4 things growing where only one should be growing. And this is one of the things I do. You'll see my videos where I go in the forest. The process is called thinning. So I try to thin them so they can grow optimally. I mean, look at here. How many trees are growing here? I'll count, and I hope you can see it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 evergreens. And then there are 2 maples, and on this side there's a spruce. That's a lot. In that space, there should only be 1 tree growing. Anyway, that's what I do in the summertime for the months that are warmer. Anyway, I bid you goodbye and good luck with your search in finding the place that you want to call home one day. And if you need me, I'm at your service. Namaste, folks.